So thank you everyone for joining us for Heroku Next Gen for Cloud Native Workloads. The real reason that all of you are here is the most exciting slide of Dreamforce, the one that's been seared into your brain by now, our forward-looking statement slide. You should make any and all purchasing decisions based on generally available functionality and not any of the forward-looking statements that all three of us are about to make. Thank you for that. But also, thank you for being here. We sincerely appreciate your interest in Heroku and the direction that we're taking the platform. So with that, I'm Chris Peterson, Senior Director of Product Management at Heroku, and with me...
Hi, my name is Ethan. I'm also Product Manager here at Heroku, specializing specifically on the compute and the runtime side of Heroku. And I have next to me...
Hey guys, I'm Vivek. I'm one of the product managers at Heroku as well. I'm looking at integrations and Connect, and look forward to meeting you all after this session as well.
Beautiful. So what are we going to go over today? I'm going to give you a brief introduction of Heroku's history and its place in the market, as well as a couple example use cases. Then I'm going to hand it off to Ethan to talk about the roadmap for Heroku. And yes, we will have a roadmap slide at the end that you can take pictures of. As always, product manager on stage, we know what we owe you. And then Vivek is going to give us a demo of Salesforce integration for Heroku, a pair of pilots that we actually just launched this Dreamforce. They're pretty exciting, if I do say so myself. Not that I'm biased. So with that, let's take our way into a history of how Heroku's paved the way in the platform as a service space. So we start with the digital transformation that every company needs to make. Your company today and the potential of your company tomorrow is the reason you're at Dreamforce. You want to unlock that potential. You want to find technology partners along the way that help you with that journey. But there are problems along the way. Limited resources, limited time, limited expertise. There is a chasm there that is hard to cross. And this is where we think Heroku plays to our strengths in helping you bridge that. Because as you all know, building apps is not quite as easy as it would seem on TV. You start with an idea, and that part, not so hard. The reason the idea guy is a meme among every developer group. Then you code it up, getting harder, but getting a working app we have workshops. You can do it in a couple hours, depending on the complexity. This is not generally the hard part, depending on what you're doing. The hard part comes when you start to try and take that to production, and you start getting into step 3. And especially if you're an enterprise, you have to start making decisions about the platform you're going to host technology on. This is the same journey that we just went through at Salesforce over many years with the Hyperforce platform. You need to make decisions about what cloud providers are going to be your substrate, what containerization strategy you are going to use, what your patching strategy is, your operating system. Do you need PCI compliance? Do you need HIPAA compliance? The list goes on and on and on. And they're all distractions from your core value of bringing experiences and value to your customers. None of these are the things that will make your business, but if you get them wrong, they could break it. And then step 4, launch. Really easy, I say, especially with our marketing team in the audience. They will love me for saying that. Kidding aside. Heroku helps you bridge that chasm. We provide a number of strong opinions that make a lot of these decisions easy if you stick with our opinions for that. We fully manage the infrastructure. We have a pipelines product that's now free that helps bridge your development environments all the way to production. So if you want to build a pipeline that defines the path from individual developers working in a Git branch to your user acceptance testing, all the way to how you promote to production, that is something you can do directly in the Heroku dashboard, integrated with GitHub or your other source control or CI/CD providers. We do all the patch management and OS upgrades for you. So no, you don't have to worry about Patch Tuesday. We handle that. We handle the security of at least the environment and the infrastructure for you. We have a very opinionated build system that really handles a huge amount of the complexity there for you. The traditional git push Heroku main that hopefully you all know and love. And a tremendous amount of work goes into our availability. This is an area we spend a lot of time and energy making sure that you don't have to carry a pager because we do it for you. And double clicking on this opinionated factor of Heroku, about a decade ago, we released the 12-factor app manifesto, which if you're not familiar with it, 12factor.net, great website, great manifesto. It's due for a refresh, which we're actually working on right now. refreshing it with some more modern concepts. But what's there right now is still amazing. These are the foundational tenets of Heroku. This includes things like your app needs to be disposable. Your file system should be ephemeral. But these opinions give you something very powerful. They give you successful organic growth over time with apps that scale without having to rewrite them as you start to hit these bottlenecks. They give you a transparent and well-governed developer collaboration experience. Everything is readily available for you to browse through, but it's also controlled what gets to production. And it helps your apps stay current longer. In fact, one of the things that I hear from customers that is an equal parts blessing and curse fairly often is that they have apps that are 4 years old that they haven't looked at. Not that I encourage this. You definitely should rebuild your app once in a while, keep your dependencies up to date and all the security best practices. But the fact that you can have an app that you have ignored for 4 years on Heroku still sitting there and chugging along says a lot about the value of these opinions and the value of the platform that underpins it. So let's look, putting this another way. If you are trying to build your own platform, your model is going to look something like what's on the left. You're going to build a fairly large infrastructure organization. You're going to have a fairly robust DevOps team building custom processes. The Hypercourse organization inside Salesforce looks a lot like this. And then you're going to have not as much money left over at the end of the day to hire developers to build the experiences for your customers that differentiate you from your competitors. And this is why we think Heroku, and so many of our customers think Heroku, is so meaningful, impactful, and important in the marketplace, is it lets you get out of the infrastructure game and shift all of those developers up the stack, inverting the pyramid, if you will. So that almost all of your team is working on your services, your digital experiences, and your customer experiences, instead of working on the things that don't differentiate you in the market. That said, there's still probably a DevOps person on Heroku most of the time. But this isn't just me saying this. It'd be kind of silly if I did this without some evidence behind it. Forrester did an analysis of one of our customers and saw a 40% increase in developer productivity, 30% reduced DevOps expenses, and a 285% return on investment, which is, frankly, one of the reasons Heroku actually runs on Heroku so much is because we need that 40% increase in developer productivity to deliver the roadmap we're about to show you. And there is a perception that because Heroku tries so hard to be simple, that it's only for smaller businesses. And that's something I want to dissuade you of. Heroku is home to 13 million apps across our history, 38 million managed data stores, most of them being Postgres databases, an Elements marketplace that contains 500 add-on services between things like databases that we are opinionated about Postgres, but if you want MySQL, we have an Elements partner for that. We have Redis available, but if you want Redis from Redis Labs with the premium extensions enabled, we have an Elements partner for that. And there's hundreds of build packs on there for languages that we don't have official platform support for, that the community has decided they like Heroku and they want to bring those languages in. In addition, there's build packs that cover things like third-party logging providers and making all of that just work. At this point, we are consistently handling over 60 billion requests a day. So to imply that Heroku is only for small scale would be categorically wrong. And with that, let me walk you through some of the building blocks for those of you who might not be familiar with Heroku. On the infrastructure side, we have dynos. These are our containerization runtime elements. These are what you use to run your apps. When you deploy to Heroku, you choose dynos, be they from 1x up to 2xl, that give you anything from 500 megabytes of memory and 1 CPU core to 126 gigabytes of memory and 16 CPU cores. And again, you worry about none of the infrastructure, none of the management. On the data side, we have fully managed Postgres services that go up to 1 terabyte of memory, more than I hope any of you will need anytime soon. But as well, we have Redis and Kafka available, so you can do event-driven or cache-driven operations just as easily. We also have Heroku Connect, which lets you easily connect your Salesforce data and synchronize it bidirectionally between Salesforce and Heroku with just a few clicks of setup. So if you're wondering what our integration strategy is, that's the one we have in market. But we got 2 more coming that we'll show you in just a minute. We have our private and shield space product, which gives you an isolated independent network. And if you go for the Shield version, it complies with HIPAA and PCI compliance at an infrastructure level out of the box, in addition to some other security features that are useful in a regulated industry. And as I mentioned a slide ago, we have our Elements Marketplace. This is 500 plus add-ons that allow you to differ from our opinions in some area that's critical for you, or supplement our opinions with something like managed log providers is an extremely popular one, or application vulnerability scanning. The choice is yours. And as you would expect at this point in the age of data residency, Heroku is readily available across the globe. Our private and Shield spaces are not just US East like everybody else would expect, but across Europe, across Asia, and more coming soon. So we have 12 different regions for private spaces, and we'll continue to expand that lineup. Looking at this from a little bit different perspective, this is what a private space, or in this case, Shield space, looks like. And this is where all of the elements of Heroku come together in your virtual private network, in your isolated environment, and all of these features start to add together. We handle the container orchestration, the log management, the runtime, your data services, but we also add things like strict TLS enforcement in a Shield space for HIPAA compliance, so that you don't have to build an ingress gateway to manage that for you. That's boring, and we want to take the boring out of your life and outsource it to us. We also support VPC peering with AWS, so you can integrate with AWS services that might be outside of Heroku if you need to, and still maintain that trust boundary and those secure connections. Likewise, we support site-to-site VPNs to give you that extra flexibility over your networking. And then we handle a number of other things that are boring but equally important, like encrypting your file system at rest, keystroke logging anytime any of one of your operators opens a shell on any of your production systems, and as you'd expect, those secure Salesforce integrations and data sync. And it's not just me. Across 9 million customers, Heroku's been incredibly successful, but there's one in particular that I want to call out, which is under technology. There's a logo you might recognize. Salesforce is actually Heroku's biggest customer. We manage over 2,000 applications for our business technology group. Everything from Trailhead itself being a Heroku app. The events app that you probably use to find this session is itself a Heroku app. And all of our Slack bots and most of our internal applications are also running on Heroku at this point. So even with our Hyperforce investment, the simplicity and ease of Heroku is something that our business technology team values so much that they keep betting on us. So how does this fit side by side with Salesforce? I'm glad you asked. Realistically, it means that in a lot of cases, you keep some of your application logic, your Apex, your flow in Salesforce, things that are bound to the transaction, triggers and validations. But you can move some of your advanced logic that might not fit into limits, CPU, heap, daily async, etc., to Heroku as a complementary service. You can put those on dynos that scale elastically as you need them. And with the work that Vivek's about to show us, that's easier than ever. So ultimately, we see Heroku and Salesforce as something that's incredibly powerful as a complementary set of services that let you grow far beyond the bounds of what either could deliver by itself, and gives you something that's managed, easy, and incredibly powerful, ready for your business to be successful. And it works. A few examples just to get you started before we dive into the roadmap. With Data Cloud, you can build advanced segmentation logic on large data sources that wouldn't fit an Apex or Flow, and easily fit that within a Heroku dyno with your 126 gigabytes of memory on our largest dynos. MuleSoft, another thing that is incredibly complementary with Heroku. We actually just took MuleSoft's Flex Gateway product, which is API governance management and authentication management, and brought that to Heroku private spaces. So if you don't want to govern your APIs on a per app basis and want MuleSoft to do that for you, that's now something you can do directly on Heroku by using our compute layer and deploying the Flex Gateway. And there's plenty of other use cases using MuleSoft services to bridge APIs based on Heroku into your MuleSoft integrations. Incredibly powerful. This is how Salesforce's own M&A hub works. Slack, well, our BizTech team writes all of our Slack bots on it, and I've been promised, coming soon, Slack documentation will be updated to show Heroku as not only the first option, but we actually are looking into some commands to make this one command to fully deploy a Slack example bot to make it that much easier for you to get started, given that our core value proposition is developer experience. Agentforce, the hot off the presses announcement. If you need to build actions for your agents that you can't do in the limits that are imposed by Salesforce out of the box, Heroku is an amazing place for this. I had dinner with a customer the other night that needed to send 80,000 API calls to Twilio within 2 minutes when they have service outages. That is not a job for Batch Apex. That is a job for Agentforce calling a Heroku action. Being able to parallelize those operations and run them at scale is something that Heroku is particularly well suited for. And it goes far beyond. One of my favorite examples from TDX earlier this year was Workday did a session about how they hit Salesforce limits on their CPQ complexity. And so their biggest customers with their most complex quotes, the top 1 or 2% of their orders, started hitting limits and they couldn't get those out the door. So they actually moved their quoting process to Heroku, tightly integrated with Salesforce, to make it so they could have tens or hundreds of thousands of lines on their largest and most complex quotes if they needed to. Archiving is another use case you see a lot. Taking a relatively low-cost Heroku Postgres instance, using that for data archiving, and using something like external objects from Salesforce to bridge that back in, gives you a way of putting on Salesforce data into effectively cold storage. And I won't go through our whole history, but Heroku's been part of Salesforce since 2007. We've launched a number of things that have been very successful, including Heroku Connect, but we're doubling down on that integration with our new integration products. And we're also working to modernize the Heroku platform. Something I'll foreshadow a little bit that Ethan will touch on is that we just joined the Cloud Native Computing Foundation as a platinum member. And from that statement, you might be able to make some educated guesses about the types of decisions we're going to be making in the future, about where we invest and how we build the Heroku platform, what technologies we choose to adopt. With that, Ethan.
Nice. Thanks, Chris. Hey, everybody. Like I said, my name is Ethan, and I'm a product manager here, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about what's up next for Heroku. Before we do that, I'll give level set where we are right now in 2024. If you've checked out our changelog, checked out our blog, there's been a lot going on. We're really happy so far with the momentum and progress that we've had so far this year. The features that we shipped kind of comes into 3 different bundles. There's the enterprise mission critical component, which you'll see a lot of the auth and identity pieces here. There are the expansion of our current features across the different products. So that makes it easy no matter what type of customer you are, online, enterprise, you can get access to the same things. And then some of the ones that I'm specifically proud of, the larger dynos, larger Postgres, kind of bigger, better, faster Heroku to enable new use cases. So like I said, really great momentum into this year, but we're also really excited for what's to come. And so coming very, very soon, I'll go into depth in a few of these. I'll start with some enhanced networking features that are coming out from me on the runtime side, developer experience improvements with some VS Code, Heroku directly in VS Code, the addition of a new language fully supported by Heroku with .NET, and then I'll hand it off to Vivek, who will go into great detail with a great demo for the eventing and integration on Salesforce. So yeah, starting with the networking enhancements. If you've also paid attention to our public roadmap changelog over the past year, we've been working really, really hard to completely redo our networking infrastructure with a brand new router. And basically with that brand new router, that means we get brand new features. So we're really excited to start delivering some of those features, really, really highly requested. We started with HTTP2, which will be GA very, very soon. And what that means is you get out of the box with no action needed by you, improved app performance, and improved page loading times, and all that stuff. So like I said, since we manage all the infrastructure, you don't have to make any changes. Your app just gets better. The next one that we're also really excited to be releasing soon is wildcard domain support for ACM. So if you haven't used Heroku ACM, really simplified management of certificates for custom domains. And now we're really excited to also support wildcard domains on that as well. And then, like I said, since we have this new routing infrastructure, we're really excited to have a brand new modern networking roadmap, which will include things past what I just talked about. It'll include things like HTTP3, MTLS, even more really, really highly requested features on Heroku that we're excited to deliver. Also up next is a new VS Code extension for Heroku. So what this means, value prop, very, very straightforward, less context switching, right? We have a developer in a flow state in their IDE. How do we keep that flow state going? And that means you doing anything on Heroku, you don't need to leave VS Code. Really excited about the resource manager in here. That means you can control all of your aspects of your dynos, databases, everything you can do from the dashboard, you can now do in VS Code without having to leave. There's also the add-on discovery. So our marketplace, again, all in VS Code, where you can provision your add-ons straight from there. And also you get to take advantage of all the VS Code things like IntelliSense. And we also have the CLI integrated straight into VS Code, so you can run your typical Heroku CLI commands, again, all from VS Code. And also this one. So we've supported 8 languages to date, and we're excited to add a 9th one with .NET. And really what that means is we're excited to look at like the enterprise grade language, that is like, there's a rich ecosystem that a lot of use cases specifically for enterprise web applications all use .NET and specifically C#. And so what that means is a fully supported language here. That means you can do git push Heroku main like you normally do with any of your other apps, now for any of your .NET apps as well. And it doesn't just stop there. That also means you're fully supported by all of the goodness from the Heroku TA, the technical architects, our CSAs, Heroku support team, Heroku engineering staff to help you with your .NET apps. So we're really excited to bring in a full new cohort of developers onto Heroku there.
And Ethan, I hate to correct you, but it's not just one language. It's actually 3, if I'm being pedantic.
Go for it.
It's C#, F#, and Visual Basic.NET. So we're not just bringing C#, we're bringing the .NET ecosystem. And as the slide calls out, we're also bringing some other things like the Blazor framework for front-end design, the ASP.NET framework, and the whole NuGet package management system that you would expect for Heroku builds.
Yep, spoken like a true .NET expert. Cool. All right, and I will pass it now to Vivek to take us through events and integrations.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ethan. So before my role as product manager at Heroku, I used to actually look at enterprise scale. And that's what makes me passionate about Heroku, because the combination of Salesforce and Heroku helps your org scale as well. So what are we announcing here today? We are announcing a pilot for both Heroku events and integration. And what is Heroku events and integration is Heroku's opinionated way of interacting with both core Salesforce as well as Data Cloud. You can also extend that to Agentforce as well. So these are probably the 8 steps that you need to take to even get started to subscribe to an event in Salesforce, or even start to publish your app into Salesforce. These are just the 8 high-level steps, but each one of these at least has 2 steps within it. So about 16 steps in total at minimum that you need to do to basically get your apps into Salesforce. What does Heroku Events do? It basically now lets you deploy event-based architecture without having to go through those 8 steps and be able to interact with both core Salesforce or Data Cloud or even Agentforce. What does Heroku integration bring on if Heroku Events does all that for me? It basically gives one step further. It basically now gives you an SDK, which is pre-hydrated with the user context. So the user at the keyboard, their context is transferred over to your add-on itself. So you can now query Salesforce with that user's context. So the permissions, the roles, the security that you set up in Salesforce now magically gets transferred into your app. So when you query Salesforce with that user's context, you will only get the data that the user has visibility to. So those triggers that were basically giving you issues as your org grows, you can now seamlessly run it on Heroku as well. In addition, we provide 2 more modes, which is User Plus or Run as User mode. User Plus is basically decorating that user with additional permissions as well. And shortly, we're going to see a demo of that. So the 8 steps or 16 steps odd that you were doing is now just 1 step to just add the add-on, connect to your org, and get started. So let's take a look at the demo.
Vivek, that sounded like 2 steps. You said add the add-on and get started?
Yeah, pretty much. So today we're going to go through the CLI, the creation of the project, as well as look at some of the code behind it. So we're going to go through integration project, Salesforce Connect, and Salesforce Import today. If we have time, we'll go through data action create as well. So let's start with creating a project. So if you look at this, we actually create a facade for you with the API spec file already created. So you don't need to think about how do I go about writing it. The API spec that we support is 3.0, which is what Salesforce expects us if we are basically importing it into Salesforce. Right now, we have two operations, accounts, get accounts, and unit of work. If we open out get accounts, you'll notice that we can provide the description, you can provide the input-output parameters, and this is synchronous in nature. However, when we look at unit of work, it is actually async in nature. So you basically are also letting the user know that as part of your payload, you also are expecting a callback URL or a callback method. So moving ahead, let's look at our index.js that we basically provide you with the code sample for get accounts. But we are using Fastify as a framework here. You can use a framework of your choice. We are just showing this as an example so that you can get started really quickly. So when we look at the code itself, what you will notice here is we have event, context, and logger right here. So event is the payload. So you can actually pass in payload in JSON format into your app as you basically call it from Apex or from an Apex trigger or an Apex class. It also passes in the context magically into your app itself. This is not something that you explicitly pass in. We just pass it in for you because when you import it, we import it as a Heroku service. So this gets passed in and it'll basically maintain the context of the current org that you're calling it from. But if you need to basically specify a connection to org2, because many of our customers, especially the large customers, now have multi-org scenarios. And if you want to connect from org A and then query org B, you can actually specify a connection to org B as well. But in this example, we're going to just look at how do you query the current org. So it's as easy as saying, data API, go query my current org, and you just pass in your soccer statement. So it is as simple as just providing the soccer statement that you want to query your org with. Exactly the same as Apex. And as I said, you don't need to filter on, hey, do I have visibility into this? The visibility, the permission sets, all of that gets added in. So you'll only get data visible to that user. So now that we have this code, we can also look at unit of work. It is no different. It basically uses the data API itself. You can register your unit of work. The SDK also supports bulk API. So if you want to do the bulk jobs, you can actually move it to Heroku. There's no limit on number of batch or bulk jobs that you can basically run on Heroku. So if you don't want to use the Fastify framework, this is the build pack that you will need to include as part of your framework when you're basically building your Heroku app. So now that we have this, let's try and authorize an org. That's the first step because you need to connect to an org and authorize. And that's just a simple one-step command to say, hey, Heroku, go connect to my org. As you can see, my first connection is already created. I have a data cloud connection as well that we'll use for data actions. But let's start with this particular connection and import the app into the org. Importing the app is, again, just one simple command that just says Heroku, import to Salesforce this API spec, provided this name, that is Dreamforce app. And that's it, you're done. Now within setup, you can actually see about Heroku and apps. So now you can see your Heroku apps within your Salesforce setup. So as you notice, the creation source is Heroku. You will also see that there are two operations that are allowed, both of your operations that show up. We also pre-populate the name credentials. So when a request comes into your app, you know exactly where this request is coming from, and the org details gets pre-populated for your app to recognize it.
And just to slow down and dwell on that for one moment, this is really the magic of this integration is all of the authentication is handled for you without you ever having to deal with any of the OAuth flows, with any of the secrets, or even trying to propagate the user context is something that's almost impossible to do yourself unless you have every user manually OAuth through the flow. So this is the real magic of what we're seeing is instead of hundreds of lines of code to approximate something that's a fraction of this functionality, it's a couple lines of code to have this ready to go and even be multi-org.
Thank you, Chris. And moving on from that, if you wanted to decorate your permission, you want to elevate your user's permissions. So user A has access only to accounts, but for some reason you need to generate an invoice. They need access to quotes and so on. So you can basically provide them permissions only during the running of the app because you trust that app. So the permission set is already created for you. You can just elevate the permissions if you need to. So moving on from there, now that it's imported, let's see where we can run it from. Oh, it does show up in Flow as well. So you can now run your applications, the operations that we basically just imported, right from within Flows. And this could be a microservice. So you can have one service servicing multiple orgs now. That could be my favorite, which is PDF Gen, or you could basically have just get accounts from Postgres or get accounts from another system. And since Heroku doesn't have any limits in terms of reading file systems and so on, you can actually get a lot of data back into Salesforce. And now it is also part of the API catalog. So you can use this as part of Agentforce as well. So the same operations that we're using, if you want to basically call your operation, say, get accounts and get accounts from an external system, basically a flat file, you can actually read it and make it available to Agentforce too.
Yeah, when I said Agentforce actions, I didn't mean over the rainbow. I meant today, like this.
So let's look at invoking it from, if you're invoking it from Apex, it's exactly the same as invoking an external service. The only difference is we are decorating that with the user context. So you only get data that is available to that user. And this is the magic. And I just getting to that, you would have to basically set up an OAuth for each of your users, as Chris just mentioned. Let's look at data actions. We already have a connection set up for Data Cloud. We already have a sample code for data actions as well. But there's one thing I do want to point out as part of this code. Just like you were querying Salesforce, querying Data Cloud, we have made it just as easy. So you can simply say, or data cloud API.query and just pass in your query. Now, data cloud query is not the same as SOQL statements. So you will need to provide the same structure as what data cloud provides. But you don't need to think about what SDK to use. You just simply use the SDK that we have already provided and pre-populated with the context of the user. So now that we have it here, let's go ahead and create a data action target. So that again is just a single command. And now you'll be able to see it within the data action list itself, target list itself. We generate the secrets for you, so you don't need to go about hand coding what the secrets are. And generally, you have somebody who's managing your Salesforce org and somebody else writing the Heroku code. Now, when you deploy it using this one command, it just seamlessly imports it. So you don't need to basically think about who do I need to give the keys to, what URL do I need to basically send them, all of that. So let's see this in action really quick. So this is just a sample web page. We're just going to add the duffel bag here, go through the checkout, and you'll see that the data action did get fired, which is the CDC event right here. And you can now take an action on your website or your mobile app.
I wish I had something that was that fast at checking out when I was trying to buy a PS5.
Ah. So that brings me to the end of my demo. And I'm going to pass it back to Chris to take you through the roadmap for Heroku. But before that, I just want to mention that both of the pilots are now available. So you can scan this QR code and get on to the pilot program.
Yeah, and we really want your feedback. We got this to pilot specifically so that we can find the edge cases and hear your feedback on it. So we'd love to hear that you're interested and any feedback you have based on this pilot so that we can adapt it and build a better solution overall.
Chris, over to you.
Cool. I'll actually talk about this a little bit. So just to recap, we kind of started with the overview of Heroku. We talked a little bit about where we are in 2024, and then we just went into what's coming up next and the exciting Salesforce aspects that Vivek was just talking about. And I'll talk just a little bit more about like what's beyond the horizon for Heroku and a little bit more of like the long-term product strategy and thinking.
Right here.
There we go. Cool. So when it comes to that product thinking, kind of examining the landscape that we're in right now from like cloud native apps and web applications, right? We know that Kubernetes is the gold standard, is the cornerstone for hosting web applications at scale right now. We know that AI is everywhere, as you can tell by here at Dreamforce. And we know that there's a lot of challenges when it comes to that chasm that Chris was talking about earlier for cloud native applications. So where can Heroku be positioned in order to compete in that landscape? So what's next for us? Stay tuned in the next coming months for some really exciting new developments and announcements from me on the runtime side about how we're rethinking about like all of Heroku from the runtime layer all the way to the top. And that really means leaning into some open standards and cloud native standards. And that's part of why we joined the Cloud Native Compute Foundation as a platinum member, is to really play in that space What that really looks like is a full rebase to Kubernetes, which is going to allow for some really great new features, new capabilities on Heroku that I'm really excited about from the runtime side. Cloud native build packs, which means enhanced deployments for your builds and your applications. And also another one I'm really excited about, open telemetry. So it's a complete revamp of what observability and telemetry looks like on Heroku for your cloud applications. And that is one big replatform. There's another one in the next slide. I'll hand back to Chris to go into more depth about how we're replatforming Heroku Postgres with Amazon Aurora in the same vein, so you can bring new features and new capabilities to our customers. And finally, some refreshed opinions. Like you said, we talked about the 12-factor app. We're going to be refreshing that, but we're keeping the same emphasis on developer experience, the same emphasis on our space, app, dyno model, and all those different things in this new space to still stay competitive, to still stay simple, and maintain, like I said, that developer experience. And Chris, I'll give this one to you to talk a little bit more about Postgres.
Yeah, absolutely. So much like we're talking about rebasing the Heroku platform onto modern cloud native foundations, we're partnering with AWS. You may have noticed Salesforce has a partnership with them that we keep talking about a lot. And it's a really fruitful partnership. And in this case, we found that the AWS specific Aurora storage engine for Postgres brings some really unique advantages to Postgres, especially in our fleet. But before you start to worry, fully compatible, no changes to your app. So this is not a breaking change. This is a rebase of our functionality on top of a new substrate that's going to let us deliver some new functionality and some features that we're hoping that all of you take advantage of and love. The first of those is that, according to the benchmark that our data team has been performing, this is up to 3 times faster on comparable hardware for the type of blended read-write performance that you see in the real world. It also has the ability to swap out the compute layer effectively instantly. So scaling up and down no longer causes a. That means if you need to scale up your database for a really big month, one of our customers, Health Sherpa, just had to do healthcare enrollment for 6 million people in a very tight window. Scaling up their database for that window, something that helped make them successful, but they had to prepare for that with maintenance. And we'd like to take the maintenance window away from that, give you better availability and the ability to effectively hot swap your compute layer on Postgres. So that rapid scaling is extremely powerful. We're also doing something to bring our data services to match what Ethan's runtime team did last year and bringing 3 availability zone durability. This means if AWS has a fault, if something catches fire, if who knows, whatever disaster happens, your data is stored in 3 different availability zones, which means we can just boot up a new compute layer and attach it to your data and get your database back online with a very fast time to recovery. And data loss becomes effectively impossible. So beyond that, it also brings to some new functionality in terms of Postgres replicas. We'll be able to support 16 replicas and be able to pool those replicas together so that you can load balance read operations on those replica nodes. And you'll be able to store those replicas in different regions. So if you have cross-region apps, this is some new exciting functionality. So ultimately, we think this is a really exciting set of capabilities to uplift our experience. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention my personal favorite. Postgres major version upgrades no longer have downtime. So there's zero-touch maintenance and upgrades as part of this, which is one of my personal favorites. Being able to hot swap those servers is really quite nice from that perspective. And at the beginning, I promised you a full roadmap, so I deliver on my promises. Towards the end of this year, Q4, we are going to pilot our managed AI inference service. This means you can take an open source model and get it deployed on Heroku in a fully managed, elastic, scalable way, effectively the same way as you would use a Heroku add-on. Next year, we're planning to add dynos to our lineup that support GPUs being attached. So you can bring those AI apps directly to Heroku, even if you have a custom model or something that doesn't fit the normal open model ecosystem. We're simplifying our pricing and packaging. One of the things we're doing, it's a great example, is making it so private spaces no longer require an enterprise contract. But we've been doing a ton of equalization here to make things more elastic, simpler, and more approachable so that there's one Heroku experience no matter how you pay for it. We're also trying to bring some of the tools like for our Postgres plans, we have the ability for the new Postgres plans on Aurora, we have the ability to scale data independently of compute. And we're going to try and bring the same type of thing to our partner ecosystem. So instead of it only supporting a tiered model, you'll be able to use pay-as-you-go, usage-based billing on add-ons that opt into that. Our new Postgres plans, I just told you all about those. Our new language ecosystem, our CNCF bet, our .NET support. We're going to continue working on tracking what languages are popular in the ecosystem and continuing to add support for those. Our Heroku integrations. Not only do we have a data integration, but we now have an event and API-driven integration, all 1 or 2 commands to get started with your Salesforce integrations. And then as Ethan alluded to, we have the next generation of the Heroku platform that we're building. It's Kubernetes-based, IPv6 support. We're actually going to be running on ARM processors, something that we can do to increase our value per dollar that you give us, something I'm very excited about once we get pricing finalized. I cannot wait to announce that. And getting rid of our limits, as well as bringing some additional compliance features like software bill of materials. That's one of the things we get automatically from cloud native build packs. So we'll be able to help you even more with your compliance obligations. Again, give us your boring. And with that, if you have feedback for us beyond the Q&A that we're about to do, you should go to heroku.com/roadmap, which takes you to our public GitHub roadmap, where you can post new ideas, comment on anything, and if you're so inclined, give us feedback on things we're already working on. The HTTP2 beta, now GA, is a great example of that, where Ethan got a ton of feedback from customers that helped shape the direction of our products. So we'd love to engage with you, not just at Dreamforce and TDX, but all year long. And it's our product team responding directly. So come heckle us if you are so inclined. Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate you being here. We would love it if you filled out the survey, and we'll buy you coffee if you do. And finally, the last few Dreamforce sessions about Heroku. So I'll leave this up, but if anybody has questions, feel free to step up to the mic. We'd be happy to take them.
The mic.
Great question. No. So there will be a few small changes to our API. Like if you're creating a private space through the API, there'll be a new field that lets you choose what type you're doing. There will be a few changes to our build system. So it's not 100%, like it's not binary compatible, but our API is staying 99+% the same. The app model, the space model are staying. So we're rebasing on top of Kubernetes to expose benefits in terms of scalability, in terms of spending less time doing some of the plumbing and more time focused on developer experience. But ultimately, it's about an evolution of the Heroku value proposition, not a discarding of it. We think our founding principles back to 2007 are pretty good. They need a few touch-ups here and there, but they've stood the test of time, and we're going to keep them.
Yeah, I will also say the change that we are expecting for that is that your builds are faster and your dyno starts are faster when you do push that commit. That would be the ideal outcome. And we've seen that through our testing.
But, we're not changing git push Heroku main.
No.
We're changing the build packs so they do better layer caching.
Yeah.
Kubernetes does better layer caching than we do internally today. And we could have invested a bunch of time and energy into trying to improve our layer caching. Instead, if there's a rising tide, it kind of raises all boats. So that's the general philosophy behind where we're going.
So your git push Heroku main just got more powerful. That's about it.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and CNB's cloud native build packs are an open standard. So instead of the Heroku build pack registry and needing to have Heroku specific build packs, this is actually an open standard that Heroku and Pivotal pioneered together and just graduated the CNCF. So it generates OCI, aka Docker images, and it's an open ecosystem. Like I mentioned, software bill of materials generation. That was actually something that the kind folks at Bloomberg contributed to the spec because they needed it internally for some of their governance. So they added it to the spec and the base images, and then we go update our build packs. But it's a whole ecosystem effect. Effectively, where the ecosystem has evolved standards, they're similar to what we did. We're going to evolve, take the standard instead of being proprietary. Not in the current plans, but our goal is to get to GA in the first half of next year. So once we have the MVP product in market, this is the type of conversation we're going to have. we've talked about it. We haven't made a decision. It's not on the current roadmap, but it's not like a definitely not either.
Any other questions? I know a few folks stood up. Yep. Feel free.
Here, you can borrow my bike.
So how much is the turnaround time when you're talking to data through Salesforce, right? I'll give you a simple example or a use case, right? You have CPQ managed package on the platform. It doesn't work well. Let's be honest about it, right? It doesn't scale when you have a number of hundreds of lines on the code, and you have to do a bunch of actions when you have to roll up summary on the code header, for example. I'm not a Heroku client today, but something that I'm gonna outsource the data operations to something different so it doesn't hit the CPU timeout limits, even in async mode, right? So today we do async mode actions to perform those roll-up summaries, for example, right? Even those go into the DQ because, the Salesforce fair use policy and all that stuff,
Yes.
if the servers are logged in, it'll go into the queue, which means the user does not end up seeing the results in sometimes 10, 15, 20 minutes, right? How do we make it faster? Can we use Heroku use case and talk to Heroku, give the operations to Heroku, bring it back quickly?
Yeah, you can certainly do that. Chris actually touched on this. I don't know if you through the presentation itself. Workday actually pushed that into Heroku for exactly that reason. Because they were hitting all those limits, they actually moved that whole quoting system into Heroku so that they can generate those quotes that need to happen.
Yeah.
We don't have any limits in terms of querying Salesforce itself. Now, Salesforce itself can be slow in returning data, but we have not seen any large delays, especially if you're doing one at a time. If you're doing bulk jobs, it depends on the bulk job queue.
And just to be explicit, Vivek's demo for the integrations feature, so the event-driven one is near real-time async, but the integrations demo he showed was synchronous calls. So you can wait asynchronously if you're doing something too big that it's going to take too long and you're going to hit call-out limits. But otherwise, that's a synchronous integration.
Yeah, and even if you do the asynchronous call-out to Heroku, right? Heroku runs it synchronously. We don't run it we don't put it in a queue and wait for it.
Well, unless you want to. You can buy our Kafka products.
That is true.
But yes, effectively, customers are already doing this today. The integration products make it a lot easier to set up and maintain.
Oh, you have me right here, so you can talk to me. Yes, I'll give you my QR.
Yeah, we're going to get kicked off stage, but you're going to give them a card. Thank you all. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.